Hi everyone! Here's something to ponder before we start our lesson. Have you ever browsed through a website which makes you feel like you don't want to stop browsing and browse for even more? Have you ever bought product online that instead of buying that one item you need, you are tempted to buy 5 items instead? Have you ever purchased a product just because you think the packaging looks nice? Like this. I'm guilty for that. Everyone, that is what we call user experience, and we are going to cover that in this video. So stay tuned. User experience or UX is how you as a user would likely respond to the product or the system or the service or the facilities. It's more like your internal feeling when you are using that particular product. Do you have that fluttery feeling? Does it make you feel excited? Are you happy just by looking at it like this Doraemon? Yes, I think I'm pretty happy when looking at it. So of course, when you are happy, you feel good, you would likely recommend that product to your family and friends. There is a high chance that you would be a loyal customer to that particular brand. The study of UX is very important because your user would be the people who would use your product. You have to make sure you jaga your customer and make sure their primary needs are fulfilled. You can improve their user experience by designing something that is easy to be used and very efficient in performing the intended task, and maybe be a brand that people trust, like Samsung. Brand is related to perception. If your brand is good, then most likely you will have a pool of customers all ready to buy your product even if they don't need it. The user experience design, or the D part in the UXD, is the process of enhancing user satisfaction and loyalty. Remember, you want to make sure your customer is happy, so it involves research and development, R&D activities, it involves developing the prototype, and it also involves testing the prototype. Basically, all this process is very necessary to ensure that you maintain the quality of your product. Okay, the component of the design process in a UX study mainly involve user interface, like this, user interface, and its usability. Ideally, the user interface is the interface which allows the user, like me, to interact with the system. For example, like this phone, that's an interface. It's button, which I have to push it up to activate it. And the knob on my 3D printer, I have to turn it around clockwise or counterclockwise. That's how I interact with my 3D printer. Or like this keyboard, so I have to punch in some command to interact with my computer. So that is an example of user interface. So ideally, the interface should be naturally intuitive to the user. So the best user interface is the one which doesn't need that extra instruction. The scope of the user interface can be discussed in the context of affordance, mapping, and constraint. Affordance means natural understanding on how to interact with the object. Naturally, when you see the doorknob like this, you tend to turn it around. When you see this kind of switch, you tend to flip it like this. When you see a button, you tend to push it. That is affordance. Without any special instruction or manual, you kind of intuitively know how to use that product. Affordance may be in physical form or virtual form. In the physical form, you can touch and feel it, like this car door handle. And look at the interface of this car radio panel. Oh dear, so many affordance features over here. Like the knob can be turned clockwise or counterclockwise to adjust the radio volume. And the buttons, so many buttons over here which you can touch to control the many features of the radios. The second type of affordance is in virtual form. So virtually, you cannot physically touch it. For example, if you came across a symbol, intuitively you know that you need to click it to save your file. If you see this symbol, happiness is around the corner. It means Wi-Fi is available nearby. If you see this symbol, Your generation should know this symbol best. So do press this symbol if you like my video. Haha! Among the issues related to affordance may be related to over-information, like this door handle. Some people would feel like there is nothing wrong with this door handle, but this is an example of issues in affordance interface. The fact that they have to label how to use a door means that it is not a good design. Like I said earlier, the best affordance is the one which requires no extra instruction. Furthermore, the door handle on the push side gives an impression that you can also pull it. If you happen to encounter this kind of door at the shopping mall or whatever, and you wonder why people just can't follow the given instruction to push and pull the door in the right direction, this probably be the main reason. Just check it out. Some people just don't bother to read. They will simply intuitively use the product in a way that they think is the right way. The second component of user interface is the mapping. No, not this kind of map, but it's a mapping which indicates relationship between the control and its effect. Like if I press this switch, the light goes on. If I press this button, my phone lights up. Similar to affordance, a good mapping is when the user can use the control and have the effect that they desire. Take example of the stove layout. The burners are positioned in a 2x2 arrangement. In order to make the burner function, you have to turn the control knob. If the knob is positioned in a row like this, how do you know which control link to which burner? It may be very confusing, especially for those who are not used to cooking. Now, look at the knob position of this burner. The placement is more intuitive as it reflects the burner's position. Now this is a good mapping design as it naturally maps the control, which is the knob, to the burner, which is the intended effect of using the stove. The third component of the user interface is constraint. Constraint means limitation. It is a very powerful tool for designers to guide the behavior of their user so that they behave in a specific way when using the product. Okay, take example of this Doraemon water tumbler. If I receive the parts separately, this is the head and this is the body, I kind of intuitively know how to assemble it because the head usually goes on the top. But other than that, the slots of this head fits the body at this side. So I don't have to be that stupid to try and assemble the head at the feet or the hands instead, do I? Basically, there are three types of constraints. The first one is the physical constraint, which physically limits certain operation. For example, fitting the blocks of this toy. As an experienced and mature adult, you already know that you cannot fit the star block in the circle slot. The star block goes to the star-shaped hole. Notice how the designer are guiding your behavior to perform specific action. Take example of fitting the battery in the remote. Intuitively, you know how to fit the battery in the compartment for the battery as it have the same shape, which fits the battery nicely. So that is a physical constraint. The second type of constraints is cultural constraints. In this case, the designer are guiding your behavior based on a widely known operations. For example, the threading of the screw is based from an international standard. So if you want to tighten something using the screw, you have to turn the screw in a clockwise direction. If you want to loosen it, then you have to turn it in a counterclockwise direction instead. So users are expected to know such understanding in a cultural constraints. The third type of constraints is the semantic or logical constraints. In this case, users' behavior are guided based on a logical set of actions. For example, if you are assembling the Lego motorcycle, you would position the tire at the bottom because based from your understanding, that location is logical for a tire. When you are assembling the mini figurine, you would position it facing forward because again, to you, the direction is logical. Semantic or logical constraint depends on your knowledge of that particular situation. general, the development of the user interface follows the same step as developing a product. First, we need to design it and then model the prototype and then test it. You see, it sounds very familiar, right? It's very similar to developing a physical product. When you are designing the concept for the user interface, of course, you have to think of the user of your product and how they would behave. Try to optimize the user interaction to fit their activities. Do not forget to consider the aspect of affordance, mappings, and constraints as discussed earlier. When modeling the user interface concept, similar to your project right now, you have to come up with the design sketch, model it with a 3D software, and fabricate the prototype. And finally, when you want to test the prototype, you aim for the usability, as in senang ke nak pakai, senang ke nak operate, is the interface intuitive, and so on. You can collect this information from interviews or focus group meeting with the specific respondents. When you are testing the usability of the product within your respondents in a focus group, try to look out for specific adjectives that they use to measure their feedback. For example, imagine if I am one of the respondents to test your prototype. Let's say your prototype is this 3D printer. Here's what I said in the interview. You all, I really like this 3D printer. The printing process is very satisfying. Assembling, so much fun lah. I am so excited because I can be as creative as I want to be. Oh, that sounds like a positive response, right? So, some other respondents would give a different kind of response, like this. Yeah, I don't like it. The color is so dull, the assembly and configuration is so boring, it is so frustrating trying to get the setting right. So, you see, how are you going to react and take action with such different responses? Some would give a positive response, some would give a negative response. So, the main important thing is you have to extract the keywords during the interview and categorize that response appropriately so that you can analyze it further. So we have covered on the user experience in the context of user interface. Now, why don't you look around you, pick some random items and observe its interface. Look at it in the context of its affordance, the mapping, and its constraint. Why don't you discuss it in the forum tab in the ULearn? Okay, so I can't wait for your responses. In the next video, we will cover on the second part of user interface, which is usability. Till then, adios amigos!